Hey everybody, it's my name is Pat Miller, and I'm the Principal of Innovation with the Simcoe County District School Board, and I'm here with Greg.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
And so this is the last in the series of webinars, and today we're talking about assessing and monitoring the effectiveness of digital-enabled learning environments. And it's interesting that Greg and I, when we started talking about kind of plan out what we're going to talk to you about today, it really made us think, both of us, about what's happening in our own systems, because it's something that we struggle with across the province. So I'm really hoping that the people that are involved in today's webinar are going to help Greg and I as much as we can, maybe give you some things to think about. Greg?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Greatly appreciate the intro into today. It really helped as we were planning, reflect on our practice here at the school and think about what I was doing in our building to make sure that our teachers are providing the best learning environment possible for the students here at my school, and of course with our board efforts, as Patrick mentioned. I believe you're up steering first, Patrick.
Yep. So the next slide really is, I'm thinking everyone probably has had a chance to fill this out yet, but if you haven't, it's just a link for Greg and I to be able to see who you are, where you're from, and what your level of experience is, so that we can better support as we kind of move through the webinar. So if you haven't had a chance to click on that link and fill that out, that would be great if you would do that now.
We're also going to share the slide deck, so Patrick will show you the next slide. That has a link to the document, so you can see if anyone has the same interest as you. Grab their Twitter handles, add them to your PLN, and follow along from there. Share that at the end of the seminar webinar today.
Okay, so this next slide just is the standard, about Greg and I. But what's interesting about it is, when you look at those two photos, I'm wondering if you can guess which one of us, Greg or I, chose the photos that go on this slide. It's another cautionary tale of be careful what picture you put out on the internet. I'm not sure where Greg got that picture from. But every time I present with Greg, he seems to find a different photo of me doing something ridiculous somewhere. This one's actually pretty tame by comparison, but just another reminder that once that photo's out there, you never know if it's going to be used for good or evil.
So Patrick mentioned this is the last in the series of webinars that have been put on. There's been some great ones in advance, especially the last one, developing a culture of digital citizenship. Patrick and I were also the webinar presenters for that one. We're very thankful in the Who You Are sheet. The main question we asked was, did you attend our last session? So we're able to know that we can use all the same jokes and everything because we don't have any repeat customers. Maybe that's a bad sign, because nobody that was at our last webinar wanted to come to our next. I'm not too sure, but we'll have to start crossing them off our Christmas list, Patrick, eh?
Yeah, done.
Why don't you start doing that? Do you need a pen?
Yeah, have you got a pen?
Yeah, sure. Here you go. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thanks, buddy.
There you go. There's our special effects for the night. Definitely, they've been building on them. It's the promote, collaborative inquiry, the implementation. They're talking about those 21st century competencies early in the fall, a good forerunner to what the MOE was going to be releasing early winter for us. Also, started talking about just teacher capacity in these learning environments and using digital technology. And Patrick and I were talking about developing a good, positive digital footprint and that culture of being good digital citizens for leaders, teachers, students in the schools as well for our last webinar. So for today, as Patrick already mentioned, we're up here talking, we're going to be at least starting the conversation with us here today about how do we actually assess, how do we monitor the effectiveness of what kind of learning environments we're actually creating in our schools. what I want you to do is we're going to have a little bit of a minds on for you right here. We're going to play a video clip, and I just want you to watch for the minute and think about, is this effective use of technology?
Can I see this?
I don't know if anyone's thinking CES call is an order for unusual treatment of a child.
Hi.
So as you're thinking about it there, and we start thinking about our use of technology, either with our staff in staff meetings, use of technology of staff and students in our schools, are we doing what is the most effective as we possibly can? And when it comes to technology, what are we really going to be measuring? What are we taking a look at? In the next slide, I want you to take a look at those three pictures and think about to yourself, are these students engaged? Are they involved in some deep learning? Are they exploring topics from the best of your knowledge that you can take a look at? I'll just give you about 10 seconds, 15 seconds to scan those images for you. What I'm going to do is, in a couple moments here, just flip through to the next slides, and that has them blown up a bit, so you'll be able to see that text a little bit better, and I want you to really think about what we were talking about there. Are these engaged students? So in the first image on the left, the student holding the iPad, as you take a look, you can probably see, I'm just even blowing my own up, my adult eyes here are starting to deceive me a bit. You can see that he's doing, I think it's called Mad Libs. My kids have them all the time. They love writing them. The kid's doing it on his iPad. If you take a close look, the words that he's inserted in every sentence is simply fart, 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 fart. So is this kid really engaged in the deep learning that should be going on when you're using technology in your schools? The next one, you might have seen this before. This is, I think, first shared that I ever saw it was with George Kuros in one of his presentations. Here's a student hammering away at the keypad in a lab somewhere. Headphones are in. Doesn't get any stimulus from inside the classroom, working on his own. But as you take a close look at that monitor, of course, nothing meaningful being done. All it's saying is simply poop, 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 poop across the screen. So again, quiet kids don't necessarily equal engaged, and definitely we're going to talk about empowered shortly. That third image, as you take a closer look, student typing away on his iPad. You can see the school desk. I think we all know that imprint of the laminate wood on every student desk we see. If you take a close look at that, the student saying on his iPad, God, I'm so bored. This is terrible. My God, I'm probably going to fail this test when it comes. I'm not paying attention at all. Wow, I don't even know what we're talking about. Christ, pardon my expression, Christ, I just look at the board. I didn't even recognize anything we're talking about. So on and so forth as you go. So here's the technology. You've got some students that appear to be engaged. What's actually going on? Now what I want you to do is consider those last three images that you've taken a look at. And on this sliding scale of student engagement, where would you put these students? First, at casual glance, if you're doing your typical administrator, principal, vice principal walkthrough, you walk by a classroom. In olden days, that quiet classroom was a good classroom. Here's these quiet students. They're typing away. They're engaged. You might think it's high attention, high commitment. But as you take a look and you go down that scale, what are we really getting at? And it's going to come upon either you're looking at some minor ritual compliance, but you're starting to look at retrievism, and if not, some deep-seated rebellion starting to happen over the learning experience and what's going on for those students in the classroom. And what we really need to start doing as well is engagement isn't necessarily enough. What we start to have to consider is engaging's easy. You can throw like that baby in the first video. Yeah, that's going to pacify them. That's going to get them at least maybe paying a little bit of attention. What we need to start thinking about is, well, how do we actually empower the students? How do we create that learning environment, and how do we ensure that it's actually going to be implemented and delivered for our students? So the change that we want to start talking about is empowered students. On that line, I forgot when we did the upload here, I didn't put Bill Farrader's name down. He's the creator of this image that's on the screen right now at Plug Us In. Bill's a great teacher out of Carolina in the States. This is an amazing slide, very simple and to the point. Engaging students, great. Yeah, it means getting kids excited about and that's the teachers, our education system, the content we're going to deliver, the interest that we have in teaching and what topics we select for our students, and the curricula that we're going to be delivered as the Ministry of Education kind of talks about. In his perspective, what we want to start doing is talking about that empowerment of the students, giving them the knowledge and the skills so that they can hone their interests, look at their passions, and really start considering their future. So it's that idea of empowering and not just engaging. We wanted to just take a second as well when it came to technology and talk about measuring the effectiveness of it. We're not the first people to just talk about it at our school. Just want to show you a couple really recent findings, some good literature that's out there to talk about. This article, when it came out, I think it was in the fall or the spring last year, I should say. It was the OECD Students, Computers, and Learning Making the Connection. The link is there on the bottom. Takes you to their website. You can purchase the actual hard copy pamphlet, brochure, book, whatever you want to call it. An e-version of the PDF is there as well. Some PowerPoints and a couple videos about it. If you didn't know this was out, a ton of newspaper articles, the Globe, the Toronto Star, CBC, a ton of American institutions, even thinking about it. Edutopia ran a piece on it and everything, the impact that this actually had. Just to go through a couple of the three findings, the first thing that they're talking about is we have to make sure that the learning environments in our school are what you'd be conducive to supporting 21st century pedagogies that we're going to be doing, and make sure that children are able to get those skills that they need to be successful in not just today or yesterday's classroom, but in tomorrow's world. Another key finding that they came up with, and this is huge for me working with in-risk students at alternative school, we really need to start talking about not just the digital divide in devices and access to the actual iPhones, the tablets, the iPads, that type of thing, but what we're really talking about as well is the inequalities in the skills that those students are being delivered. What we're giving our vocational level students to do, what we're giving our applied level students, at-risk level students. So we really need to make sure that we improve and level that playing field out for all learners. And the last one, and more often than not, when you look at some of the learning materials, an article just came out in the States today. I tweeted about it earlier today. Technology is most effective when students are doing research, they're gathering information, and most importantly, it's the real world practical project work that we're giving them. That's when the technology takes over. If you're just using it to substitute and use the same old thing and fill in worksheets and everything like that, it's more of the distraction. But when you give it a purpose, that's where it's going to take over. So those are the key findings out of this report that we had. Another good article to take a look at appeared in The Atlantic. Just the quote from the article here, the link for you to read the whole thing was, the article title was Why Technology Alone Won't Fix Schools. And it's a really great quote from the author. Technology's primary effect is simply to amplify our human forces. So in our classrooms, in our schools, technologies are going to amplify whatever pedagogical capacity our teachers have and what they're delivering. It's just going to magnify the learning that's already taking place in the classroom, unless you really start shifting and taking a look at what's happening in the classrooms. So essentially, as we all know in this probably webinar, technology is not going to get rid of all our problems. What it's really going to do is magnify them. So we have to make sure we take a look at what's happening in our schools to make sure that's effective. Here you go, Pat.
Thanks, Greg. So this is the description right out of the guide, which basically outlines what we're going to talk about for the rest of the day. And so we have, I have principals in our system who ask me, how do I know if there's an effective technology-enabled learning environment in my school or in one classroom in particular? So we're going to talk a little bit about how you might discover that. as well as look at some of the tools that are out there to help us along. Some of them people will be familiar with, the SAMR model, TIMS, and the ISTE standards. But we're also going to look at maybe some strategies to help teachers self-monitor. So if you look at the next slide, really just has our goals for today. So the first one, we're going to look at what a technology-enabled environment might look like. We'll look at those tools and frameworks that might support that in your schools. And then how do we help administrators foster creativity, critical thinking, and metacognition? And those three are the last three out of the ministry's new 21st century competencies discussion framework that came out in January. So in the first webinar last time, Greg and I talked about the first three competencies. So we're going to talk about the last three today.
We also wanted to take the time and take a very quick glance, just the connections that this topic has to the Ontario Leadership Framework. A great place to start from and to really see the effectiveness. And here we are kind of modeling. We're not just picking the tool, just picking the technology, but take a look at what the purpose actually is. So the first one we thought about was taking a look at just developing the organization to support desired practices. And some of this tech that we're using, and we'll show a couple examples of this, is really great for that collaborative culture and definitely distributing the leadership and giving a voice to teachers so that they can see the impact they have on what goes on in the school and then start delivering that for the teachers as well. It's really good to talk about vision and action, your goals and mission for your schools as well. It's really good to help in allocating resources in support of what your vision is. You can start creating, we'll mention later, innovation budgets. School success budgets can go towards some of the innovative practices that you want to see carried forth as well. And it does help, and this is part of it when it comes to that, I guess, the monitoring that we have to look at is the right oversight. If we're going to be spending money on purchasing devices, is it going to be effective use of that money? Is the return on that investment worth what we're putting out there? Just the second quick connection is, of course, just that instructional program. Part of it is as digital leaders, connected leaders, hopefully we're able to retain those skilled teachers. We're not driving them away looking for greener pastures at other school. We want to make sure that teachers are in a collaborative environment, that we have distributive or shared leadership, and that we are sharing the vision, and not just our own vision, but building the capacity of our staff to create that collaborative vision for the entire school. It definitely helps with providing instructional support, using it for delivering feedback to teachers, as well as just collecting information from them as well in the TPA process. And again, monitoring student progress and learning in your school. It's really easy to start taking a look at some of the technology, see what's going on in classrooms, data, both anecdotal, qualitative, and quantitative information at the same time. This next slide here, was this? Oh, Pat, this is up for you now.
Yeah, this is just, Greg and I talked a little bit about this in the last webinar when we talked about connecting with communities and the importance of finding out where that community is and starting where they are, and then bringing them along as far as you can in the time that you've got them. And I think it lends itself to this topic as well, because it's not about every teacher being in the same spot with the way they use technology in the classroom, but it's about everybody knowing where they are and moving as far as they can in the time that they've got. And so I think it's one of those kind of ideas that you can use pretty much anywhere. But I think specifically here, that's what scares a lot of teachers, and it also can hold back administrators from going into classrooms to have that conversation if they're not sure where those teachers are and where they should be going. So we kind of wanted to bring that up again this time.
And just a point too, we mentioned about staff. I know here working with in-risk students, it's important to know where these students are coming from as well. And we start a lot of our learning initiatives for students that have really had a hard time in learning. They haven't been engaged. They have been essentially with no voice, disenfranchised, a host of issues, never presented with the same learning opportunities. So we start them very slowly and bring them into what we're looking at for the time that we have them here in Alt Ed. We're going to take this opportunity to talk about lessons from the past that still have some really good relevance for what we're doing now and into the future. I should give the proviso that I was a history teacher at one point. So again, of course, some of the stuff that we've gone through, the same lessons apply. And what you're really talking about here is let's start thinking about building teacher capacity and awareness over what is the technology going to do for us? How is it going to impact the learning? As we watch this video, it's a 1960s instructional video on how to use film technology. I want you to think of a few things. Think about what does tech do for us? What does technology actually do? Think about some connections between what film strips were in the 60s to what we have available today. What does it take to be successful in using technology in the 1960s? Does that apply to today? And of course, why even bother using technology in the first place? We'll start the film video up now, Ben.
An ideal way to study a film and prepare to use it with your class is to preview it with pencil and taking notes as the film progresses.
The eye of the motion picture projector cuts through the barrier of distance to let students observe people and places half a world away, to witness the drama while they consider the problems of our times. And finally, students can see through the use of classroom films what they need to understand as they develop their skills for the future. The lens of a motion picture projector is an eye that can help you stimulate, motivate, educate your students. But like any eye, it must be pointed in the right direction. Its wise use demands selectivity. Behind the eye, there must be a brain, your brain, making the selection, choosing the perspective that serves your goals.
With pencil.
So out of those lessons from the past, I noticed Dave, Abby just talked about elementary school using that projector. I actually still remember, I didn't use one as a teacher, but I remember the film strip with the accompanying tape and the beeping. Beep, move to the next slide, beep, move to the next slide. So it's that delivering of content and information. Really interesting stories. I first started using this clip even when I used to do smartboard workshops and seminars and full day, 2-day sessions on them. I used to have a slide, and I pulled up the same slide where it was stimulate, motivate, educate your child. The technology, it's not any different necessarily. It's how we need to start using it that's important. So taking a look at opening the world for all our students, letting them have an eye on the world, the quote that's taken right from the movie, and it's that wise and selective use. What is your goal, and how is technology going to help you meet that goal? The same things that applied to film strips and projectors in the 1960s still apply for any of the technological tools we're going to be talking about today. And if you're really going to talk about the assessing and monitoring, if you haven't covered this and built the teacher capacity around this section before you even get moving in your plans in your school, we're going to have some issues there. So keep the learning up front and center.
I think too, Greg, your point about those first slides where it's are these kids engaged, and you look at what they're doing, and I always say from the doorway, from the classroom doorway, you can't tell, right? And so if your monitoring of a technology-enabled learning environment happens at the doorway, then you can't tell. So even with this projector, a principal from whenever that was taken, back in Dave's day, I guess, if the principal walked by and saw them using a film projector, they might think, well, that's cutting edge technology. These kids must be engaged by this video. But if you don't actually come in and sit down and talk to the kids, and if you're not present in that learning, then it's difficult to tell whether they're engaged in it or not.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Patrick.
Go ahead.
Patrick.
Yep. So I was just going to say that Greg and I looked at this document in the last webinar, and it was fairly new. to most people, and you may have had a chance to look through it or maybe not. I know in our system we've had a chance to go through it, but we haven't really decided what we're going to use it for, or how we're going to use it, and so we're looking for some guidance from the ministry and also from our colleagues around the province about how this document might support our work. But if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I would spend some time running through it. The interesting thing, towards the end, it outlines the 6 competencies that they're looking at discussing. And we've seen all of them before, the C's. But the one that I find most interesting is the learning to learn, the self-awareness and self-directed learning, and having kids discover how they learn best. And so I think that might have been the missing piece for us along the way. So we'll talk a little bit about those 3 today as well.
Just break down a little bit. We'll try to touch on these as we're going through today. It's embedded in what we're doing. I don't think we've done it quite as overtly as we've done in our last webinar. We're going to take a look at the 3 that will have a focus running throughout the rest of the webinar today. The critical thinking and problem solving, it's really taking a look at those project-based learning, challenge learning, give real-life complex problems. What are they doing when they're breaking down to analyze what's going on, address the issues that are present? And it's getting about managing, designing, and looking at projects, which is not just for school, but prep for later on in life. Looking at a ton of different critical thinking tools that you're going to have, the interpretation and processing, analyzing, that type of idea. The inquiry process is huge. That's what we're looking at here. And definitely then in the next stages of learning is that connection and transferring lessons learned to new and different situations as well. Next,
Greg.
Yeah.
The one thing about that last slide that this one here, it's this last line: make connections and transfers learning from one situation to another. I was at a local company today, a web design company, and we were talking to the owners about what they need in new people coming out of school. And it was around this whole idea of we don't often stretch kids in the problem solving when we do a whole bunch of new learning around a tool or a strategy, and then we give them what we think is a problem to solve. But they know very well that we've been learning about X all week, so in order to solve this problem, I need to use that tool or that strategy we just used. And so what we talked about was providing kids with a range of tools and strategies, and then when you give them a problem, they have that whole toolkit to go back and look on to help them solve that problem. So it's not just we did division all week, so this problem that you've given me at the end is probably a division problem. It's having rich problems that require students to go back into their toolbox of a range of strategies, a range of technologies, and decide what is the best tool or strategy for this particular problem.
Good, thank you, Patrick. Of course, innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. And then Patrick just talked about that. It's the complex problems that they're going to be faced where they can't just keep doing the same thing over. It's being able to be adaptable and bring new approaches to different situations. Being able to take things past what's given, enhance, improve, and expand on them. Risk-taking is huge. It's that idea of get them out of their comfort zones, get them moving a little bit farther and faster where the true learning is going to take place. The inquiry, research, and digging in and finding solutions to those problems that they've been presented with, having those community connections where they can take what they're doing and apply it to the world that's directly around them. We have some great uptake with activities that we use with our students with some of the local areas, community parks and things like that in our area. And of course, the idea of leading and motivating, and it's that entrepreneurial spirit. Sometimes my students aren't so positive with their entrepreneurial spirit, but it's that idea of moving forward and verging into new territory and beyond traditional silos of education and taking that learning and applying it to the real world. This is the one that Patrick mentioned. I was laughing because this is exactly where I take a look at self-aware and self-directed learning. When we start looking at tools for success and new models of learning, this is going to be key for what we're doing. Having students look back on what's worked, what hasn't worked, that metacognition is really important about how each individual student learns. The growth mindset is huge. Our engaged math efforts here in Peel District School Board, major cornerstone of that, applying that to life outside, the challenges they face, the goals, the setbacks, a lot of self-regulation issues with our youth today, so kind of reinforcing what goes on there, and we can keep going on. But realistically, it's that idea of managing all aspects of their life, their physical fitness, their wellness, the social-emotional states, and of course, their mental well-being at the same time. As we move in and go through today, what we're going to do is just show a couple things about how do you actually start talking about critical thinking, problem solving, the innovation, and the learning to learn. One example that we have, these are the tech goals for our school, 3 different sites. We'll have about 1,200, 1,300 kids in our alternative program by the end of essentially May this month. And what we started doing with staff, and this was their input as well of what students needed, and we came up with some very specific and easy goals. The first one, because we have 3 different sites, we wanted to make sure that we built teacher capacity in using tools and showing what information was out there. So we created connected lunch and learns. We have one site down here with me in South Mississauga, one in Northwest Mississauga, and another main hub site up in Brampton. And then we have about, I think we're at 12 satellite sites scattered throughout the board. So this was a way for teachers to connect into the learning that was going on, Google Classroom, collaboration tools, problem-solving activities, things like that that they could use. The next one was to start thinking about our theory of action, which still talks about providing our descriptive feedback to students. So we're tying in all our initiatives, and we keep going back to them. It's not just a new thing every month, a new thing every school year. We start working on that. So it's how are you going to use, and we let them have the choice if they wanted to use Explain Everything, they wanted to start taking a look at Fresh Grade. We have some teachers with Seesaw and stuff like that. So it's the descriptive feedback is the purpose. You can pick the tool for what you want to take a look at. We've done a lot of work on just the skills and focusing our lessons on what skills we wanted our students to deliver. So that was their third goal. The fourth goal was key for us as well. And it kind of comes in a little bit with the monitoring, so you could see what's going on as well. But we had a folder in our SharePoint website for our school that teachers, once they were done, would post that learning material. And it wasn't so much, it would help me because I could see the teachers that were posting and what was going on in those classrooms. It was the sharing and definitely confidence building that other teachers could go in. They could take a look at that SharePoint website. They just have a quick screen capture of where they've listed the documents they created, PDF, Word, links to outside resources, everything like that. So it was a really good way in sharing our efforts in bringing that digitally, technologically enabled learning to the forefront and let other teachers see, wait a second, I just can't keep myself in my cave. I see all my colleagues out there are starting to move their way forward. I better come out as well. So that was a good way, to monitor and also encourage other staff and provide some support for them as well. So if I have a math teacher that's created a lesson and posted on our SharePoint, a math teacher up at our Brampton site or a math teacher over at our West site could use that same lesson and keep improving it and moving it forward from there. So the definite is setting the clear goals, sharing our efforts as well publicly, breaking down those silos. The next thing that we started doing, and I think I've mentioned it, is we started embedding, creating 21st century technology-enabled learning into everything we do. One thing is in our board, we have Code 23 school success funds, and it is one of the 3 things we keep focusing on with our students. So when it's the what, and it's identify the professional learning you intend to pursue, what you're going to do, what you're going to create, it's the first one. We're talking about 21st century teaching and learning embedded into our curriculum. So that's a way to tap in and access money and funds that way, and other board initiatives. We also made it a key component of our school's TPA process as well. The template came out from all our contractual negotiations and everything that way, and then we identified what was most important for our school and what we would be looking at, and as part of our vision, and then how the teachers could contribute to meeting that vision. It's outlaid in that image just at the bottom. The school is focused to continue great work being completed, and it's 21st century teaching and learning embedded into the curriculum. We keep placing it everywhere. It's not something that's going away and we just keep building on it. So it's the 3rd year we've been adding different layers to it and expanding and entrenching it into what we're doing. Another thing that we have available as well is the last point right here is that secret pot of money. Everyone gets it every once in a while. We have our innovation fund. As a school, if a teacher is doing something really cool and amazing, they want to go a little bit deeper, they want to share it, they want to do something, I have a reserve of money that I'm able to allocate to some of the really cool and interesting things that are going on and encourage that use and support those teachers moving forward from there. And all of that's done. I'm monitoring funds being spent. I'm monitoring what's going on. It's not really talking about any big brother type of aspect. It's very collaborative. Teachers are open. They're sharing what's going on, and I can see what's happening in the school quite nicely. So it's a very comfortable thing. And it's not really me assessing their worth or their value or their efforts. It's sharing what's going on and recognizing, as we said, everyone is where they are. We're taking them from their starting point. We're just going to move them as far along the continuum as we can. So it's not 1984. It's not the board office staring down, taking a look at saying, okay, you have 450 users of Google Classroom in your school. They've created this many documents. They're doing this. There's this many links. We're not looking at those statistics. So it's more encouraging for staff members. Patrick.
So we're going to talk a little bit then about if monitoring doesn't necessarily mean a surveillance, like Greg's talking about. If it doesn't necessarily mean that, what does it mean, or what can it mean in your school? So I say to anyone who will listen to me that if you want to monitor what's happening in your classrooms, and this is not new or groundbreaking thinking, but you need to be present in the learning, and then you need to ask questions of the people who are involved. And so that's kind of what we're going to spend some time now doing. We're going to ask you to come up with some questions that you can ask students and other educators that'll help them be more reflective and help them be more of a self-monitoring situation. So you don't really need a clipboard to go around and just check off what a technology-enabled learning environment looks like. I know because I've done that. I went through that kind of stage of thinking about, okay, well, I want to make sure that all my classrooms have these things, so I'm going to go through with a clipboard and just make sure, check off everyone has what they're supposed to have. And that kind of surface level, what you end up with is compliance. So if they know you're coming around and you're going to check to make sure certain things are in place, you'll get compliance. But we're kind of past that, and we're looking at people believing in instead of buy-in, we want belief in. So we want people to believe in what they're doing. And so if you look at the next slide, we're going to use something called Pender, and we used it last time, and I had a few calls from some of the folks in the webinar about what Pender does. But Pender is just an add-on for Google Forms, and so what it'll do is the responses that we fill into the form that we're going to look at in a second, it will automatically take those responses, and rather than put them in a Google sheet that you have to sort, it will take them and automatically put them into a Google Doc that is separated by teachers and students. So you'll kind of get a feeling of what it does once we've populated the form. But if you're interested in Pender and what it can do to help you save some time and organize your data, a quick Google search on Pender would help, or I'd be happy to help folks as well. So here's the question, and there's the form. So what we're asking you to come up with is a couple of questions that you might ask a student or an educator to help gain insight into how rich is the technology-enabled learning environment in that classroom. So if you picture yourself either walking into your library or a classroom and you see a student there, what kinds of questions can you ask that student or that teacher that might help you get a better understanding of what's happening with technology in the classroom and how actually effective is the use of technology in that room. So Greg and I are going to be quiet for a few minutes and give you some time to think and actually put some questions into that form, and then we'll show you the results and we'll share those documents with the group afterwards as well. So if you want to click on that link, or it's in the chat box too, and add your questions to that form, we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Patrick, I'm not taking off. I hear something out in the hall. I'll be right back.
Also, while you're filling out that form, as soon as you submit one, you'll get a request to submit another response. So it'd be great if everyone could fill in a couple of questions and build a little resource for all of us.
Do you want me to share the links to the documents, Patrick, in the chat window as they're starting to type away?
That'd be great. And if you could also, maybe we could share the results page on a screen share.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll do that in a second. I'll just copy these for a second.
Okay.
So just quickly sharing my screen right now instead of the presentation. This is the educator section. It's nice how it divides it up. So it just, is this the question that you would ask students? It's just students or educators. It tells you who. And then these questions are laid out. So how might you establish whether or not your students are using the technology appropriately or effectively? Really good idea to start looking at that. How's their monitoring, I guess, of it going there? Another good one just at the top there, creating collaborative learning culture in your classroom. What are the ways? What are the examples? So we can keep building that list as we go. Those are great questions to start asking teachers. Really good for embedding that in standard questions that you ask all your teachers in the TPA process as well. So I mentioned some of that earlier. The other one is talking about students. These are always easier. We feel a lot more comfortable asking students questions. Sometimes it's more challenging for staff, but those questions are the hard ones that need to be asked. Learning most effectively with others, collaborating, connecting, how's technology help you learn? Those are always my go-to questions as I walk around my school, talking with students in the hallways and in the classrooms at the same time. So in the conference chat window, I did share the two links. On the version we'll share out as well on the Google Doc, it does have the link for educators and students as well. So that won't be hard for you to grab and use going forward.
Greg, the other thing that would be great too is if you could share this this link to this form with some of your colleagues in your system, we would get a richer and kind of more broad group of questions that might help all of us. So if you have a little professional network you want to send that out to, that'd be great.
We put it out just earlier. Twitter is a classic example. Share the link that we had, not the original. The results are great, but make sure that form link goes as well from the slide at the same time.
Just a couple more minutes, Greg.
Yep. Yeah, of course, the student list always builds longer.
We're seeing a lot of questions that are asking people why they chose that tool for that task.
I also like that question that comes up. Thank you for asking. It's that, how do you provide teacher support? What can we do to help you as well? And that's a key role. Showing that they're supportive when they're doing innovative or new things only encourages them to go a little bit further and deeper as well. So that's an excellent question to ask at the same time.
Right. Somebody also asked, what new learning can I support you with in technology-enabled learning environments? I think you learn a lot about a staff member or a student even when you ask them, what support do you need to help you do what you need to do?
Yeah, their open stance to learning type of idea is key. Ready to roll on here, Patrick?
Yep, I think that list can kind of carry on.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Greg and I were talking about over the last couple of weeks is this idea that we've got this huge untapped group of people that know a lot about what happens in classrooms, and we don't always go to them and ask them, and that's the students. So and then that little quote that's under there with the kid with the loudspeaker, so often school is what we tell kids they need, rather than kids telling us what they need. And I think the more time you spend with students asking them what they need and what tools they need to be successful, will help with a whole range of issues. But one of them is around engagement and empowerment, which Greg was talking about earlier.
In the downloadable version that we'll share, just a really quick link of a video. I had a conversation with this girl about how she's using technology. She has a couple struggles in getting to school and everything. So it's how is she using tech? So just a really quick example of just capturing that conversation that you have with a student over how technology is going. Ben, I'm actually going to skip showing the video to save some time today. When we give you that regular one, you'll be able, participants, to take a look at it from there.
So at the beginning, we talked about tools that can help support your work, and I think we've seen a lot of talk and a lot of resources around the SAMR model, which is in the bottom left-hand corner there, about moving from substitution of one tool for another. So instead of using that projector, now you're using a smart projector. But if you're still doing the same task, then really it's just substitution and moving up the scale to redefinition. And we've also seen the TPAC model about finding that sweet spot between pedagogy, content, and technology. We were going to spend some time today talking about TIMS and ISTE, but in the interest of time, we'll just look quickly at the technology integration matrix. And if you haven't seen that one, it's worth having a look at as well. It's just a different way of visualizing how to move from the beginning stages of where a staff might be and moving them further along. And I think it's easier for staff to find themselves on that continuum.
That's same for ISTE and those standards as well, Patrick. It's nice because it shows teachers of, oh, is this where I'm supposed to be? And it's that target. We may have our school board vision or our school vision, and those ISTE standards are a good starting point for where do I go, what should I actually be doing, what does it look like in my classroom. What's nice, we've got a link to a PDF there for you for the ISTE standards for teachers, but it's really good because it also has the standards for students. So what is it going to be like for using technology and technology-enabled learning for students, for teachers, for administrators like all of us in the webinar today, and they go even one higher, I do believe it's out there for superintendents and administrators above that, so your senior admin teams. One of the key things that we're really talking about moving forward is once you've given them that vision, given them that chance to know where they're supposed to be, if we want to talk, we started talking about student empowerment, what we have to make sure we're doing is we talk about teacher empowerment engagement first. So how do you go about doing that and using critical thinking, some of those competencies that we mentioned earlier? And what you really need to start doing is making sure, we've talked about the standards, what you really need to hammer home, this quote from Shersky is amazing, but from Dean, what we want to make sure is that you have that clearly defined vision for your staff, for your students to shoot for. That's the expectation, that's the target, that's the why, if you want to talk about Simon Sinek as well. Why are we going to be doing this? What's the importance of it? And just as an example of doing that and building the capacity, empowering staff, our school here has been doing a pretty big shake-up for Alt Ed and Peel, lots of staff consultation with our leadership group going forward, rolling everything out. We had at our, that's coming up this Friday, the April PL Day was the huge rollout. And what we eventually came to in our vision, it was taking a look at, okay, here's our vision. What obstacles do you foresee coming? And we rolled this out for all our staff. And what they started taking a look at was, okay, wait a second, you're asking me what problems that we can foresee. But most importantly, and what they really appreciated was we also went to them for what are your proposed solutions? And that helped, develop our kind of understanding of where staff were coming from so that we could really start to prepare and get ready for any critical elements that came from OSSTF and things like that. But I don't know if you're going to be able to see it very closely. And one of the student staff feedback forms, you can see the link later, the staff said things like this empower us. So they recognize that simple use of technology to solve problems has actually empowered the teachers to go even further that way. We do the same thing. Our board is going through a revisioning right now. Those two pictures that are on the slide was essentially the core for the last 5 years of the vision for 21st century teaching and learning for Peel District School Board. We have been under an undertaking started last spring before the labor interruptions in Peel, and we've been working on it all year and gathering input, and building support has been key for us in going ahead, so getting teachers on board so they know where we're going. So we've been busy building support, tons of time in doing book talks, film reviews, study groups, everything like that, wherever we possibly can, funding what's going on in schools, principals approaching us. A big one that's there as well that rolled out was George Couros' new book, Innovators Mindset, out in a lot of different schools, a lot of different groups, curriculum instruction delivering it. Our information technology resource teachers are using it. Will Smith's book, From Master Teacher to Master Learner, was a heavy influence as well. And we've been rolling it that way. So it's that building the capacity and the visioning going ahead. And then actually PDSB and Patrick Ford Simcoe did the next slide as well.
Right, so this clip is from Most Likely to Succeed. And so on the PA Day in April, we screened it in all of our elementary and secondary schools in a common screening. So we had about 95 locations where elementary and secondary teachers were together watching this film. And we kind of set it up with a message from one of our superintendents, which talked a lot about what Greg was talking about in terms of giving people permission to try things. So Anita Simpson, our superintendent of program and innovation, set up the movie by saying, you know, you have the permission to try. And then we showed the movie, and then we followed it up with a short video about it's already happening in places around our county. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't had a chance to screen it yet, this is the trailer for it. Do we have time for the trailer, Greg?
It was supposed to be a 45-minute session, so we're approaching an hour already.
Okay, so the trailer is available. It's in the slides. It's only a couple of minutes, but it'll give you an idea of what the film's about. But if you're interested in screening this film in your own district and you need a contact info, just send me a note through the chat, and I'll make sure you get the contact info to screen the movie.
And the link will be there as well for them when we do move forward. And just an example of, this is what we wrote out. The movies we're showing, we did it here in Peel. One big central showing at a high school. And then we've ordered, I don't know how many copies where individual schools are signing out for showings at their school when it's convenient, a PL day, staff meetings, things like that. So we're also doing the most likely to succeed in building that energy and passion for bringing that change. So getting it rolling and getting it out there and seeing what's happening has been key. Just a little bit back to just talking about revisioning. This, I think, will take you on the slide to the site that we put together. We actually went out with our teachers, our administrators, our PIC committee, parent involvement committee, and we started asking them what do they want and what's going on in your classroom. So we've taken a ton of input from all these staff members to ensure that they're on board, that the support's there. And what's really good is through these technology tools, we have a mass of really good quantitative information that's going to drive our need to revision and go forward. And it's really good at showing the amount of support we have from our employee groups. So it's amazing that way. And it's been a little bit surprising about how progressive things are. We've staged sessions across Peel District School Board to make sure this happens with all our different groups. So the link's there. We can take a look later at your own time about what that site looks like. And the surveys are all there, links to them for you as well. So you can take a look at what we were asking, what we're going for in our revision of global competencies at Peel District School Board. We're rehashing some of our old stuff. I guess I could take from our last session off because nobody was here. These are the key things. Talking about it's not about the tools, it's really about the learning and what you want to make sure. So as you're having those conversations, as you're observing lessons and taking a look at, are our teachers building relationships with their students? Are students building relationships with each other to overcome those obstacles and problems? Are they connecting to experts that exist outside in the world, universities, doctors, physicists, things like that? The really big one, it's hard for our organization to get their head around, is that complete flattening and providing that access. And it's really the information coming up as well. So what it's really helping with is these ideas are coming from everywhere, and it goes right up to the director, up to our committee and the co-chairs for the revision of the board at the same time. And it is shifting the culture of our school board, which is amazing to feel and be a part of. And we are modeling how we're learning from everybody. It's the teachers together, students are showing us everything that way. It's the stories of the learning that's going on in our school board that we want to bring to the surface. So that's key there. And part of it is too, and it's the one on the left, it's all about the balance. Sometimes paper is great. We use flip chart paper in some of our revision, and we've used sticky notes. We've done the dot matrices and everything like that. It's just seeing where teachers are and knowing where we have to go that's been key. We were just having a conversation today on our collaboration committee, it's called. It's the co-chairs of our 21C committee, including myself, curriculum and instruction. Our new CIO is there as well, and he keeps talking about we need to have one learning platform in the school board. And we're saying, well, not really, because as soon as you start going after one learning platform, you're going to alienate everybody else. What we need to start talking about is before you select a tool, whether it's Classroom, Office 365, My Class, anything like that, there are those important key questions. And the first one that leads everything that we do, and teachers need to make sure they're asking this, and you want to hear these, what is the learning that you want to see happen in your school, in your classroom? And realistically, even for a student, what's the learning that you want to have happen on this task, and why are you selecting this tool to ensure that it happens? Mm-hmm. So these questions apply to everyone. How does the tool support the learning or change the actual learning for you? Does the learning tool actually make the learning deeper? Or is it just obfuscate the whole situation for yourself? Does it cloud the point? Is it tool, device, platform agnostics? We want to avoid any of the over Microsoft, Google type of idea. And the last one we always mention is a bit of a, have you read the terms and conditions? Making sure you know what's implied. And I mentioned, I don't know what the details are. I'll look into it. We have lots of staff using Seesaw, and there might be some information issues about data and everything that way with Seesaw. So start taking a fine look at that information as well. We're getting close to the end here. You want to keep dialogue, network sharing. Of course, the On Ed Leaders hashtag is there. Fantastic resource for Ontario educators. And what's really cool about that, we talked about the flattening of the organization here. The On Ed Leaders, it might have been started by OPC, CPCO, and ADFO, but it's now become a hashtag that any leader in education is now using in Ontario, and that's absolutely fantastic. So we're getting rid of that worry about Is the teacher using this hashtag? Is a student using this hashtag? Realistically, anyone can take a look at it. Your standards connected principles chat, CP chat's another great idea to take a look at. And a source, and we should mention it as well, if you're really looking for some top quality questions that teachers can be asking themselves that you can modify and ask them, take a look at George's Quiros' Innovator's Mindset as well. And especially off his blog, there's a lot of good questions that come. It's in the book, and the blog has a lot of good questions that you can use for book studies and everything, and you can turn those around and use with your staff as well to ensure that technology-enabled learning's deeply embedded in your school culture. Patrick, why don't you do this last one?
Yep, so it's this is the last slide we've got for you today, but what we wanted to do is send you away with something to try, either when you're done the webinar or sometime in the next day or two. And so they're listed there for you, and just choose one, or if you want to do all three, I know Greg will do all three, is go out and take one of those questions from the Google Doc and go out and try it out and talk to a student or talk to a teacher, post the question and maybe part of their response, and see what you come up with. The other one is to have a look at one of those 4 tools that we talked about, maybe one that you haven't looked at before, and just tweet out a reflection and use the ONTED leaders hashtag, and just say, just having a look at ISTE Standards and a comment, and see what kind of conversation you can drum up. And then the third one is find somebody who doesn't know about the 21st Century Competencies document and share it with a colleague and start a conversation there. And it may be somebody in your school, a staff member, or it could be another colleague across your district. But when you do that, make sure you use the ONTED Leaders hashtag, so we can kind of build your own PLN and also engage others around the province.